Hey Paul, do you remember that episode that we did on Police Quest where we just kind of didn't do any prep for anything? We just went in, talked about how awesome it was. We just filled an entire episode that way.
I do, yeah. I remember that.
So that went really well. So it gave me an idea for this episode, in which we are going to talk about another game that is also really awesome. In this case, it's going to be the Colonel's Bequest, and guess what? I brought a friend.
Oh, lovely.
So surprise! So it's a great pleasure to welcome back to the show a good friend of mine and the one-person dev team behind the Crimson Diamond, Julia Minamata.
Hi, hi.
Hello, dear. How have you been?
I've been really well, Paul. It's good to hear from you.
Nice to hear from you too. This is a lovely surprise. I feel like I'm on like a game show, and somebody from my high school past just got brought out.
Yeah, so I thought it would be a nice little surprise, a little last minute, but I thought it would be great to talk about one of my favorite games, one of Julia's favorite games. I'm assuming it's one of your favorite games, Paul. Don't say otherwise. If there's some serious trouble in it for you if you say it's not one of your favorite games.
You know, as much as I like to cause trouble, I do actually love that game. I do.
So just before we get into the Colonel's Bequest, how is everything going with the Crimson Diamond?
It is going rather well. I got into a contest thingy called the Toronto Ubisoft Indie Series, and what it is, it's sort of like a little competition for small studios to kind of pitch a game to Ubisoft and I guess some people from National Bank who are co-sponsoring it, just to kind of see if they can help support the indie game community in Toronto. So it's kind of a cool thing. So I've been busy making up a pitch for that, and squashing a few bugs here and there when I get feedback for the Crimson Diamond, and it's going rather well. I kind of before I learned about the pitch thing, I've been working on adding some content, and some of you lucky beta people have access to that, and I want, if you guys ever manage to play it, I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Because I mean, there's already been it's already a different demo that's available now compared to when you were first on the show. How many different versions has this been now?
There have been 8 beta versions, but I will say, so the demo that's up on the site right now is still the same demo section that everyone's seen already, or most people have seen already, but sometimes some features get added, some bugs get taken away, but I've only have a few people sort of testing the next sections of the game, and I think I sent it to you guys. But anyway, that's sort of future stuff that I'm working on. The demo is still being tested, and people are still managing to find bugs, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And yeah, it's not going to be new to anyone who has played the demo already. Not too new anyway.
Right.
Love the game. I love how large it is. I was really kind of taken back at the size of the, I guess, could I say cabin?
Yeah, the
Would that be
lodge, I suppose.
large? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's just such a like immense large game to explore, which is really really nice and really professional and refreshing. Like there's so many games on that come out of AGS that are lovely, but they're really tiny. Especially when it's a one person team, and the fact that you're doing it on your own, it's really panning out to be like a proper like a game that Sierra never made sort of thing. It's just I'm just amazed at how large it is and how much thought and detail's gone into it. I absolutely love it. And I've also loved trying to force it to work on Macintosh, which is going really well. So that'd be good for people.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. The reason it is so large is not from any type of planning. The lack of planning is what I'll credit the fact that the lodge is so big, because when I started making it, I just wanted to make a house with a bunch of rooms. And if I had been thinking about designing a game from the outset, I would have done it for efficiency purposes and sort of only included the rooms that are required to make a game. But I had to put bathrooms in because you need a bathroom. You need a few bathrooms in a lodge. I don't know if there's anything in those that are gameplay specific, but I don't know. I kind of got carried away, as you can see, with the cupboards and the drawers and the little couches, and you can sit down and.
hmm
But I mean, I guess it's part of the charm.
Even if there are a few rooms that aren't absolutely crucial to the game, it's still kind of nice just to have like a little bit extra. It's always nice to have a game that feels a little bit bigger than the actual game itself. And it's kind of cool just to have these rooms that just sort of exist because they were there, even if it's not necessarily vital to the story of the game.
I feel like that. I do feel like that because people have different ways of starting a story or creating a story. And some people start with characters. Some people start with like a scene in their head that they want to create in a story. And some people, well, what I did is what some people do is I created a setting. And it's not because I was setting out to design a game. I created the setting because I wanted to create the art mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you create a place like that and then you create things happening in those places, you're not necessarily going to have every screen is going to have some purpose. It's just because, as you said, the overall kind of encompassing world is what you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of how I approached it. So I don't mind the fact that there are extra screens, and I do enjoy that as well. And I think that as a solo person working on my own, and I'm not contracting the art out, I can do those things. I don't have to worry about paying an artist to do needless busy work or stuff that's not going to make sense for a budget.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, I think it's particularly lovely in the point and click adventure, especially parts of the genre where it's nice when not every room has a specific need to fit the plot, because I feel like that takes some like kind of mystery and fun out of it. Where it's like if you know every room serves a purpose, like specifically, it's like all right, you're only here for one reason. What I got to do? Whereas I think it adds like kind of like an open world sort of feel when you can just freely explore the environment, which is why I fell in love with the whole genre to begin with.
Which is what I do every time I'm a guest in a new place. I make sure to visit every single room and take a look through their cabinets and drawers. It's just it's just realism there.
Yeah, no, yeah, these are facts. I act like I don't know my left from my right. Like, oh yeah, bathroom's 3 down on the right. I'm like, I'm gonna go left. What you naughty children got in your top drawer?
They always say people will check the medicine cabinets in the washroom. That's for the amateurs. I like check the attic.
I just nowadays I get really paranoid about toilets. Like I'm like, do you have to hold the handle in? Like what you got to do? I don't want to end up like that scene in Dumb and Dumber or whatever, making a mess and clogging it up. It's a strange phobia of that, considering it's not yet happened. But enough about me doing poos in other people's toilets.
That's confidence. I don't know if I was going to be a guest at a party if I would be able to do that. So good on you.
Yeah, you got to turn the vent on and turn the sink on for no reason. Need a lot of ambiance to make it happen, but we get there.
First thing I do when I'm in a new person's place is take a shower.
Yes. Yes.
So clearly one of the really big inspirations on your game is the Colonel's Bequest, which is why I thought it would be appropriate to bring you on to talk about this really cool game, which is I think you and I were talking about this just before the show, Julia. It's not necessarily an underrated game, but it is kind of overlooked. It's not really talked about quite as much as, say, King's Quest, Space Quest, or even Police Quest. It's sort of been there, kind of just for the Sierra enthusiasts. They all know about it, but it's not really hit like any real mainstream knowledge for as mainstream as adventure games ever really got. Like, would you say that Colonel's Bequest is your favorite game, or is there a specific reason why you chose the Colonel's Bequest to kind of, or the aesthetic of the Colonel's Bequest to kind of revolve your game around?
Well, I would say that for the art style at least, it was my favorite. And I think part of the reason for that is I read an article in Computer Gaming World uh, back in the day. I found it recently. I hadn't seen it back in the day, but it talked about how when Roberta Williams was designing a lot of these games, she would sort of do a quick sketch of, for King's Quest or whatever. She'd do a quick sketch of what she wanted the room to look like, and then she would send that over to the artist who would then, recreate whatever her sketch was basically. But for the Colonel's Bequest, she did a lot of photo reference. So she took a lot of photos. She gave the artist references of plantation houses and told them to kind of create something from those floor plans and from her photo reference. So she didn't actually start with a sketch to give them, which I guess would get kind of really restrict their creativity more.
Mm-hmm.
So she was giving them sort of a more control over what they were doing, so they were able to produce really, really distinctive and moody art in EGA and in the graphics that they had. And I think that's when I learned that, it made me like it even more, because I realized the art that I responded to the most in the Sierra games was the art that the artists had the most freedom with. And I think that really shows in the game. So I think that's one of the reasons it's my favorite.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've always noticed dealing with anybody creative or artistic, it's like the more freedom you give them, the better it turns out. You know, if you keep them inside a box, they feel restricted, and the end result is usually just a little uniform or whatever. So that's actually really interesting because it does stand out artistically. You know, it's like a little darker, literally like in the palette. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that's really cool to know. And to your point a second ago, Rick, where you mentioned that it's just oddly not as in the conversation. It kind of reminds me of like, you know, a rock band puts out an album. I don't know, go with like Guns N' Roses, and it's like everyone knows "Sweet Child of Mine," but there's always that one track that's like just for the real fans, and like that kind of reminds me of Bequest, where it's like like a gift to the like the
Yeah,
Sierra enthusiasts. And I was gonna say maybe it's because it didn't end in Quest, but it kind of technically does
kind
end
of
in
does. Yeah.
Quest.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, me too. Actually, that's one of the things I kind of I always really liked about it was the fact that they kind of slyly inserted the quest in there.
Right, and now I can use the word bequest, and you know it's like one of those words that's out of circulation, and I get to feel intelligent. Like Rick yesterday kept saying pedantic. I was like, "Ooh, you're so sexy when you
Ooh.
talk like that."
So is there going to be a lot of gameplay elements, like a lot of gameplay mechanics, other than the fact that it's like obviously taken from borrowing a lot from that sort of EGA SCI era of walk around text parser sort of thing. Is there like I guess board sort of um, I guess sort of story mechanics? Is there a lot that you're going to be incorporating into the Crimson Diamond from the Colonel's Bequest?
Yeah, in a way, yes. There. So I don't want to spoil any mechanics for people who don't want anything spoiled, but I will say that in one of the segments, the section that's after the demo, it's the morning, and you actually get to do a little bit of field work out in the lodge surroundings. So that means you get to sort of collect some tools, and you get to do a little bit of analysis and learn a little bit about rocks and things. So I feel that aspect of the game is a little bit like Freddy Farkas, Frontier Pharmacist,
Mm-hmm.
where you get to use tools and analyze things just a little bit. And
Right.
I think so. I mean, with that, there's that, and then there are other things that the Colonel's Bequest does that I feel like I wish were explored more. That they sort of touched upon a little bit. And I guess I'll go into it a little bit because I don't think it's too spoilery because it's a mechanic in the game that people will end up discovering. But the Colonel's Bequest had sort of a fingerprint mechanic, a little bit,
That's right.
where you could find a couple fingerprints here and there and observe a few things. And I kind of wish that they had explored that a little bit more in the game. So I'm doing that as well. So there is a bit of detecting happening. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the two main ones are those two things. And then also of course in the demo we have that the listening and the eavesdropping on people. So those are kind of the three main ways that people will be able to play.
That's really cool about the fingerprints, because now that you mention it, you're absolutely right. It almost seemed like they finished the game and was like, "Hey, quick, go back and throw in like 3 or 4 fingerprint
Hmm.
pots because that's Detective E." But yeah, now that you mention it, that was really kind of inconsistent in the game, but it was well fun. So anyway, looking forward to that. That's pretty cool. And like you said, the field work outside that really back to the extra rooms and stuff. Like I really well like that idea, just being able to explore, just like Bequest, Chronos Bequest, being able to explore outside as well. That's something to look forward to.
That's one thing I really liked about the Colonel's Bequest. It's one of the things that really stood out to me as why it's one of my favorites. Is that granted there were a lot of ways to die, and sometimes they were a little bit too random, but the challenge of the game wasn't necessarily getting to the end of it. It was more just like how good of a detective were you during the time that you were playing. So a lot of it is that for those who haven't played it, you basically get to the end and you basically kind of the game evaluates how well you did to actually solve the mystery of what was going on in the time that you were there, which is really kind of it was really interesting because there wasn't really a whole heck of a lot of inventory puzzle kind of things. Like there was inventory stuff, you got to use this on that, but a lot of it wasn't like, oh, you have to do that necessarily in order to progress, or at least they downplayed that a lot. So it wasn't quite so much like the standard Sierra or standard any adventure game of that era where it was, oh, you gotta in order to progress, you have to find this item, use it here, and then you can move forward. It was a sort of like if you're in the right place at the right time, time will move forward, and at certain times things will happen, and at a certain time the game will end. And what did you learn today?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's kind of cool in the sense that it's not necessarily like a walkthrough walkthrough heavy game. Like you don't really need, at the end of the day, it's like some of those more brutal early EGA games where walkthrough, at least nowadays with Google, feels almost necessary. Whereas Bequest could really just be enjoyed and just kind of
Hmm.
take your time, go through it, see what you gather. It's not so much like I'm really just well stuck here. What do I do? I need a walkthrough. I need help. I think that's a huge benefit,
Yeah.
honestly, because needing a walkthrough is probably not ideal.
It actually kind of just occurred to me now that, because it wasn't really a straight up quest game. It was the Colonel's Bequest, sure, but it wasn't like it wasn't, say, Detective Quest or something like that. It's kind of
Right.
funny because it actually wasn't really a quest. It was really just a detective game. It wasn't really an adventure of you going out and doing all this stuff. It was more the stuff is happening around you and you got to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah, that's a good
Rob,
point.
Roberta Williams said in the Computer Gaming World article that I read that it was sort of an experimental format for them, where before they had done very puzzle heavy games where you, in order to progress, you had to solve certain things or smash two inventory items together. And she wanted to focus more on the narrative of the experience and the atmosphere in the Colonel's Bequest. And I think she said in the interview that her and Ken wanted to move toward more interactive stories. So it's kind of a shame that they didn't really get the chance to continue with that format. I mean, they did a little bit with the Digger of Amon Ra, but there wasn't as many of these games as I would have liked to see. And the thing is about it is that type of kind of easy to get through, experience the story type of game, I think is really well suited toward a game nowadays in the modern time where there are so many adventure games that are sort of easier to get through, but it's all about that experience that people get to have with the narrative. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make the game, was because I wanted people to, yeah, experience a story. And it's more about that than puzzles. And I feel like more people and a broader audience of people would be interested in that type of thing over, almost impossible puzzles that were created back in those days.
Yeah, that's really well said. It can be kind of polarizing, stuck in one little category if you force it to be, like those really puzzle heavy ones. It's almost like you have the option of how much you want to put into the game. I don't want to say emotionally, but I guess I'll settle for that since I ain't good with words. But you know what I mean? Like it's up to you how much you want to immerse yourself in the game, on that level. You can kind of just be pretty casual about it and get through it, or you can become like full on detective, making little notes with like an actual pen and paper on the side. And I like that about it. You kind of have a choice.
Yeah, I've actually seen a Dagger of Amon-Ra speed run on YouTube where where this guy was playing it, and he knew it so well that he was explaining, oh well, we can shave a few seconds off here, we can shave a few seconds off there. And there are people that really get into it, and I love that. And I love
Yeah.
that the people that are willing to do it, but I also love people who just want to, kind of, noodle around and just, enjoy what they have in front of them.
Mhm. And it's great. I think it was a lot better maybe at the time than now, just because now I kind of want to spend as little time with the game as possible, just get through it. But what was amazing at that time was just getting through the game and realizing that I knew almost nothing about what happened, and then the final little evaluation of saying like, okay, well, did you figure this out? Did you find this out? When did you first get here? I was sort of like, I was supposed to do these things. And it was it kind of blew my mind that like, oh wow, I'm just so used to all these previous games where you just do the thing that moves you forward. I didn't realize that, oh wait, I was supposed to actually be paying attention to other things. So it's kind of cool that to go back and just be like, oh wait, there's stuff I could do better even, and just like find out what's going on. And there's so many questions I just totally didn't answer. And in fact, one of the things I kind of needed the hint book. I had no clue about any of this until I actually read it in the hint book, that there was this entire side story about events that took place well before the Colonel even really took over the plantation. There's like this whole history that you find out through the clues and finding out through all this side detectiving. You can uncover this entire other story that's just totally not even a part of the actual game.
Yeah, that's what's beautiful about it. It's because it's not black and white, yes or no. It's not you did it or you didn't do it,
Hmm.
right? It's about how well you were able to understand what was going on and how much you were able to learn and how what you figured out about the characters based on what you observed. So I guess we were so used to at the time, it's either you did it or you didn't do it.
Hmm.
You can go forward or you can't. But with that game, it's and also with the Dagger of Amon Ra, it's more about the quality of how you finished it, not just getting there.
Yeah. Although you really should pick up the boot in Dagger of Amon Ra. I
Oh my
think that's one
goodness.
thing you absolutely need to do, if nothing else.
Yeah, I was going to say related to your previous comment, Rick. I had that same moment with Dagger of Amon Ra when you know. Try and keep it light on the spoiler factor. Not that you lot ain't had like 25 years to play it, but still. When you get to the very end and you have to recap everything, I was like, oh, I wasn't paying any attention at all. It's just kind of like very direct line thinking, like one thing to the next, and then in the end they start asking all these questions. I'm like, I wasn't told there'd be any quizzes at the end of
There'd be a
this.
test.
GameFAQs.com enter.
So was between the two games, Colonel's Bequest and Dagger of Amon Ra, and this I guess a question for both of you. Did you play it in the order of Colonel's Bequest then the Dagger of Amon Ra?
Yeah, I did. I did. Yeah. I mean, I can't really add anything more interesting to that except that yeah, I did. First one and then the second one. I can't believe I'm talking this long about absolutely nothing.
I do that all the time. That's that's the entire show. And how about you, Paul? Did you play Colonel's first?
I did, yes,
Oh, okay.
yes. I played them in order. I felt a little bit of pressure there for a second. I'm like, how can I add something clever? And I got nothing as well.
It was a simple yes or no question, guys. I was mostly just wondering because I was curious about if anyone had actually done it the opposite direction, and just seeing like was there anything that was kind of was there anything that we take for granted having played Colonel's Bequest first and then Dagger of Amon Ra? Was there anything that was particularly challenging about going backwards?
And I enjoy the Dagger of Amon Ra quite a bit. I love the notebook that you had in that game where you can kind of ask people stuff that you discovered in the notebook. I
Right.
liked the art was great. I can't say that I had anything against it really, except it was a brighter game. You're in a museum and everything's lit very well, so you don't get that creepiness of that
Hmm.
first game, that creaky old house where stuff can just jump out of the shadows. So I do like the house setting more, and I do like the EGA colors more than the VGA stuff. So for me, it's that. And also, of course, the text parser for me
Mm-hmm.
because I'm actually curious to find out if people who came to the text parser games after the point and click games how they feel about those text parser games. It's hard. It's
Mm.
impossible for me to say because when you start with that with the text parser, there's always a feeling for me at least that that's the way that I loved to play those games. That's the way I preferred to play them. So I would say that no, I like Dagger. I do. I wish there were more. Yeah.
How about you, Rick?
I think it was for me. It was the Colonel's Bequest was just so much more groundbreaking. Dagger of Amon Ra was basically I wouldn't necessarily say a full-on objective improvement, but they did improve things. They improved the graphics generally. Going from EJ to VJ, that was generally regarded as a step up. Point and click interface at the time, it was regarded as a step up from having to wrangle with the text parser. So I think because I really grew up in that time, like I was playing the parser games when they were new, and then I did actually kind of appreciate when things sort of took the step upwards, so to speak. I was always appreciative of the progress, but so I never really had an actual allegiance to text parser is the way it has to be done, or I didn't think that necessarily point and click was so vastly superior to text parser that I can't ever go back. So even though those were kind of like regarded as improvements and step ups from the Dagger of Amon Ra and the EGA SCI era, it was just so much more groundbreaking Colonel's Bequest for all the reasons I've explained before, where it was just like this whole totally different approach from any of the other Quest games that we really played by Sierra. Whereas Dagger of Amon Ra, being of course the sequel, was a continuation of that. Some might argue an improvement, but it was different. It was like even if you were to regard Dagger of Amon Ra as an overall better game, uh, it is sort of the difference between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, where it's just sort of like, yeah, Empire Strikes Back might have improved on a few things, but Star Wars was just this gigantic, something totally different from anything that anyone had really seen at the time. That's just my personal feeling. I'm not saying that it exactly was a perfect analogy, but that's how it felt to me. It was just sort of this game that was just, I'd never experienced anything like it, and Dagger of Amon-Ra was more of that.
Yes, I also like Star Trek too.
All right.
Me too.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just total shit with Star Wars references. I thought I'd muck it up. My problem with that whole series was I was like I just missed it. So like by the time it was time to watch it, I already knew about the whole Luke thing, and I'm like, the big twist ending was ruined for me, so I never got into them. But anyway, no, that's a good reference. And now that I'm kind of thinking about like the history, as Julia said, like so it's impossible to say when you start with passes to judge it in reverse. And I'm thinking like the first few games I played were passes, like Police Quest and Gold Rush, and then I moved to like Maniac Mansion with the Scum engine, and then I played a few of the SCI games, and I tend to actually like them in that order. Like I generally prefer like a EGA text parser, and then I'd probably put Scum second with the 9 verb thing, and then probably SCI if I had to rate them. But as you said, Rick, it's kind of gun to your head sort of comment to make anyway, because they all have their own place.
I don't know why people aren't making any more text parser games, really. I mean, we have the technology, clearly.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the thing is I mean, especially nowadays where, we talk about, okay, well, text parser, are people really going to be prepared to type things all day about, in a game? And I'm thinking to myself, people are typing things all day nowadays anyway. I mean, more than they ever have, so why not?
Mhm.
And I wish that there were more, and hopefully, I mean, well, Phil Fortier, who's a fellow guilder, is making Cascadia Quest, which is going to be a welcome addition to the text parser sort of library. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I wish there was more of it, and I guess that's part of the reason why I'm making mine.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm glad you are. I've said it time and time again that you and Phil are kind of carrying the torch for Sierra, for that era of Sierra as far as the text passes. And between your demo and then Phil's work with Void Quest and the Snail Trek series, and like you said, the upcoming one, it's really nice to see them going forward and to have good reception. And yeah, I'm thankful for it. In me youth, as far as having the text passes, because especially then without like spell check and stuff, because I actually like probably learned something about it,
Mhm.
like not to use like unnecessary use in the word color and favorite and stuff, because they didn't really adjust that for me. But
That's another thing. I don't know why there aren't more mystery adventure games.
This is one of those things where there's so many cool ideas for games that just unfortunately don't really have much of a market these days, because the video game industry has gotten to the point where if they don't make millions and millions and millions of dollars, they just don't bother. Like, they don't consider it a success, even if they make money, even if they make a profit. If they're not, if they haven't stumbled upon the next multi-million-dollar annual franchise, a lot of studios just don't even really care about it.
Yeah, no, I think that you see that in the world of cinema as well, where it's like it's safer for them to reboot a known classic because they know that their bottom line will be an acceptable figure, as opposed to come up with something just well
Mhm.
creative and fun and new.
I mean, we could go the episodic route, but even then, Telltale Games just folded in on itself. So I mean, and they were kind of one of the last hopes for any like actual big mainstream adventure game
Yeah, I was
company.
well disappointed when they collapsed. I mean, obviously for the actual people involved, I feel horrible for them. But on a selfish, personal level, I was really bummed out because they just recently had announced they were going to do a Stranger Things
Oh,
series, and then they folded. And that would have been a really cool
mhm.
platform, I think, for an adventure game.
Yeah, that I mean, it is too bad, and I feel like what's happening now is the same kind of thing that happened in movies as with computer games, as video games, I guess. In that, yeah, I mean, you've got these huge projects with these huge companies, and they cost tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And so what you get is you get sort of the broadest possible general audience pleasing global type of thing where you don't get something that's unique or personal or interesting. You get the same thing because that's what people want to see when they go to the movie theater, apparently. But what you also get is you get, smaller scale productions that can and have the ability through kind of, I guess, Netflix, partnerships or whatnot, that they can actually take some risks. And for a huge company like Netflix, they can take creative risks with a
Mm-hmm.
few little projects here and there. And if some of them don't work, it's fine. But if some of them take off, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot more creativity in those smaller projects. And I feel the same way about, I suppose, adventure games. Why we don't really see those AAA adventure games is because it's just you can't justify it. The size of the audience, you can't justify it for the cost. But for independent, developers, like we're really tiny small studios, there's a place for that. I mean, people still want those types of games. But I mean, it's not sort of like a huge scale operation. It has to be something more personal. And I think when it's more personal, you get to have a unique story where you get a unique character, or you get some kind of, a story that you might not have seen before,
Mm-hmm.
really. And I think it's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely, and that's why I love the indies so much. That's why I love
Hmm.
indie gaming, is because that's where you find the more creative ideas and the things that sort of try to break the mold and try things that sort of want to take that risk. But it's unfortunate because you look around at some of these on some of these discussion groups, and it's kind of heartbreaking. You see these people who are like, oh, well, it's $40 and that's too expensive, or it's $15 and that's too expensive, or just these games come out, $30, and they're like, oh well, I'll wait for a sale to so it comes down to five, and it's just that's the time we live in now, where uh, not only is it a really niche market, but that niche, or even just people in general, they don't really want to spend a whole lot of money unless it's like the next Call of Duty, and then they'll spend $80 on it.
Yeah, which is really strange because they'll go out and buy like 2 or 3 Red Bulls or Starbucks that day that'll total like $12 or whatever. But they look at a game that's $9.99. They're like, let's wait till it's a little cheaper. Like, come on, mate. Like, help
Yeah,
out the
good
people who
point.
did it so they can give you more of them.
Well, it's a flip side of a good thing, which is that digital distribution has made it so easy to sell stuff on the internet, like games and things, that we have thousands of people making games, and it kind of makes it harder to stand out, and it kind of makes it way more competitive in terms of pricing.
Hmm.
So in a way it's been good for indies to have sort of like this new internet world where we can easily distribute stuff without having to fight for shelf space with the big boys. But at the same time, it kind of it makes people think that I'm not going to buy something for anything more than $5, which is obviously not sustainable for creators. I think the greater accessibility, for creators. I mean, of course, it's always going to be the thing I cheer for, and it's whatever drawbacks there are. I mean, it's the positives will always outweigh the drawbacks. Um, for instance, there are a lot of people making narrative games nowadays,
Hmm.
because their software and the technology is there so that it's easier for people who don't have as much of a technical background to create. And I think it's awesome. And when you see with that is you see a lot of different voices, you see a lot of different stories, and then you see the audience is also diversifying and broadening in a really cool way. I mean, when I showed at Wordplay in Toronto last fall, there were, there's a showcase of about 25 narrative based games from all over the world that had, there were short little games that were really cool and different and unique. And even though the mechanics might not have been very cool and unique, or it's not top of the line physics based textures and everything like that. It was just what you got were intimate little stories that were compelling and personal, and they were great experiences. And I
Hmm.
and I think that that's a great way to have games nowadays, and it's something that we never really had a chance to see before.
So I think that about wraps it up for today. Thank you very much again, Julia, for joining us. It was great to have your insight and to catch up with you again. You were the very first guest on the show way back when. It's not really even way back when. We're not even a year old, but it is really good to have you back on and get a little bit of an update on how things are going with your game.
Thanks for having me. I always love doing it. It's always a pleasure. So,
Oh, well, we love you. You're a sweetheart and you're super
aw.
talented. And everyone, please check out thecrimsondiamond.com.
Yes, please do.
And yeah, and thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.